Hey guys, tonight we're retaking you back over 2,000 years to one of the most magnificent cities the ancient world has ever known. You're about to become a lighthouse keeper on Pharos Island, just off the coast of Alexandria in 150 BC, where you'll tend the great lighthouse, one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. The salty Mediterranean breeze carries the sounds of a bustling port city, merchants haggling in a dozen languages, and the gentle lapping of waves against marble steps. Just try not to invent electricity by accident. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're settling in from somewhere around the world, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where this story finds you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The world shifts around you like morning mist dissolving, and suddenly you're standing on smooth marble steps, your bare feet cool against stone that's already warm from the early sun. The scent of salt and seaweed fills your nostrils, mixed with something else, burning oil and the faint aroma of exotic spices carried on the harbor breeze. You blink, adjusting to the brilliant Mediterranean light reflecting off white limestone walls that stretch impossibly high above you. You're at the base of the great lighthouse of Alexandria, and it's more magnificent than any description could capture. The tower rises in three distinct tiers, a square base of pale stone blocks, each one larger than a modern car, topped by an octagonal middle section, and crowned by a circular chamber where you can just make out the glint of polished bronze. The entire structure seems to pierce the very sky, its summit lost in the soft morning haze. Behind you, the harbor spreads like a jeweled crescent. Dozens of ships crowd the water-sleek Egyptian grain vessels with their distinctive triangular sails, stubby Roman merchantmen, heavy with cargo, and elegant Greek triremes with their bronze-dipped rams glinting in the sun. The famous Heptastadion, the stone causeway connecting Pharos Island to the mainland, bustles with cart traffic and pedestrians, their voices creating a distant hum of commerce and conversation. You turn back to the lighthouse, still marveling at its impossible height. Funny how modern people think they invented impressive architecture. This tower has been guiding ships safely home for over a century, its beacon visible 30 miles out to sea. You run your hand along the perfectly fitted stones, each block so precisely cut that no mortar was needed, just the ingenious use of molten lead poured into the joints. A wooden door, reinforced with bronze bands, stands open at the lighthouse's base. The smell of burning oil drifts from within, along with the sound of someone moving about. You realize with the start that you're expected somehow, in the mysterious way of time travel. You've arrived precisely when a new lighthouse keeper is needed. You step inside, your eyes adjusting to the dimmer light. The ground floor is a storage chamber with thick walls that keep the interior surprisingly cool. Clay amphorae line the walls, each one sealed and labeled in Greek script that you somehow understand perfectly. These contain the precious olive oil that feeds the great beacon above. Coils of rope, bronze tools, and spare mirrors rest on wooden shelves, everything organized with the methodical care of someone whose life depends on preparedness. A spiral ramp curves upward along the inner wall, the famous helical road that allows donkeys to carry fuel to the upper levels. You can hear their hoofbeats echoing from somewhere above, along with the gentle voice of someone coaxing them along. The engineering marvel of it strikes you. A roadway winding up through the heart of the lighthouse, making the daily work of maintenance possible. You begin to climb, your footsteps echoing in the cool stone chamber. The ramp is wider than you expected, easily accommodating both foot traffic and the supply donkeys. Small windows pierce the walls at regular intervals, providing glimpses of the harbor and city beyond. With each turn, Alexandria spreads out below you, the great library complex with its columned halls, the palace quarter where the Ptolemies hold court, and the maze of streets where 500,000 souls make their daily lives. The sound of hoofbeats grows closer, and you press yourself against the inner wall as a small donkey rounds the curve, panniers loaded with oil jars. The animal pays you no mind, sure-footed on the smooth stone, followed by a weathered man in a simple tunic who nods politely as he passes. His presence feels as natural as breathing, apparently. Your arrival here requires no explanation beyond the simple fact that lighthouses need keepers, and keepers sometimes need replacing. As you continue upward, you wonder what brought you to this moment, this place, this ancient responsibility. The Mediterranean world of 150 BCE stretches around you, vast and alive with possibility. Alexandria stands at the crossroads of Africa, Asia, and Europe, its harbor welcoming ships from the far reaches of the known world. And you're about to become part of that grand story. A guardian of travelers whose names you'll never know, but whose lives will depend on your steady attention to flame and mirror. The ramp curves onward, leading you toward your new life as Keeper of the Light. The helical ramp delivers you to the lighthouse's second level, where the square base gives way to the octagonal middle section. Here the walls are pierced with larger windows that flood the space with golden morning light. You can hear voices, ahead one younger, speaking with the careful precision of someone asking questions, and another older, patient and measured in response. You round the final curve and find yourself in a circular chamber, where an elderly man kneels beside a complex arrangement of bronze mirrors and oil lamps. His hair is white as sea foam, pulled back with a simple leather cord, and his hands move with the practiced grace of decades spent in delicate work. He looks up as your footsteps announce your arrival, and his weathered face breaks into a gentle smile. "Ah," he says, rising with the careful movements of someone whose joints have grown stiff from years of climbing stone ramps. "You must be the new keeper. I am Apollodorus, son of Nicias, and I have tended this beacon for 37 years. The harbor master said you would arrive with the morning tide." He speaks in Greek, but somehow every word flows into your understanding. As naturally as breathing, you find yourself nodding, though you're not entirely sure how the arrangements were made. Time travel, it seems, handles certain practicalities on its own. Apollodorus doesn't seem surprised by your sudden appearance, perhaps. Lighthouse keepers are accustomed to accepting mysteries as part of their daily routine. "Come," he says, gesturing toward the mirrors. "There is much to learn, and the ships begin their departures with the noon sun. We cannot let a single vessel leave our harbor without knowing they can find their way home." The mirror assembly is more sophisticated than you imagined. Polished bronze discs of various sizes nest within an intricate wooden framework, each one angled precisely to catch and redirect light. During the day, they capture sunlight and send brilliant flashes across the water to signal ships. At night, they amplify the great oil flame that burns in the chamber above. These mirrors, Apollodorus explains, running his finger along the edge of one bronze disc, were cast in the workshops of Memphis, where they still remember the old techniques. See how perfectly curved they are, not flat like a common-looking glass, but shaped to gather light and send it exactly where we need it to go. He adjusts one mirror by the smallest fraction, and suddenly a beam of reflected sunlight dances across the opposite wall. You marvel at the precision. Each mirror can be adjusted independently, allowing the lighthouse to send specific signals to different parts of the harbor. A flash to the eastern entrance warns of shallow water near the reef. 3 quick flashes toward the west indicate favorable winds for departure. It's a language of light that every ship captain in the Mediterranean knows by heart. But the real art, Apollodorus continues, lies in reading the sea and sky. Watch. He moves to one of the large windows and points toward the harbor mouth. Do you see that merchant vessel attempting to enter? Roman-built, heavy with grain. From Cyprus, drawing deep water. The captain is steering too far north. He cannot see the sandbar that shifts with every storm. Apollodorus quickly adjusts to mirrors, sending a series of bright flashes toward the approaching ship. The vessel's movement changes almost immediately, the captain altering course to follow the safe channel marked by centuries of local knowledge. Every lighthouse keeper must become half sailor, half astronomer. Apollodorus chuckles. We read, "The winds and the way birds fly predict storms from the color of sunset, and know which stars the navigators use to find their bearing. The ships trust us with their lives, so we must trust the sea to teach us her moods." He leads you to a wooden table where charts are spread, not the precise maps you might expect, but elegant drawings that show the harbor's depths, the seasonal wind patterns, and the migration routes of fish that help captains navigate. These charts represent generations of accumulated wisdom, updated constantly as the harbor changes with time and tide. "Your predecessor," Apollodorus says gently, "was my apprentice for 12 years before the fever took him. A good man, careful with the flames and kind to the supply donkeys. The lighthouse chooses its keepers. I believe we must have steady hands and patient hearts. Too much excitement in a man's nature, and he grows careless with fire. Too little curiosity, and he fails to notice when the sea changes her patterns." You run your fingers over one of the charts, feeling the textured papyrus beneath your touch. The ancient world suddenly feels less distant and more immediate. These aren't museum pieces, they're working documents, tools of a trade that keeps the Mediterranean's greatest port functioning smoothly. "Tell me," Apollodorus asks, settling onto a wooden stool with obvious relief for his aging joints, "what do you know of fire? Not the common hearth flames that warm a house, but the great beacon that must burn steadily through winter storms and summer calms alike." You realize this is your first test, though his tone remains kind. In this ancient world, knowledge means survival not just for you, but for every sailor who will depend on your light to guide them safely home. You look out the window at the busy harbor, where dozens of ships carry goods, people, and dreams across waters that can change from gentle friend to deadly enemy in the span of a heartbeat. The weight of responsibility settles on your shoulders. Like a comfortable cloak, funny how some duties feel more natural than others. Apollodorus leads you up another section of the helical ramp, past storage chambers filled with clay jars and coiled rope, toward the heart of the lighthouse's mystery. The sound of crackling flames grows stronger with each step, accompanied by a warm, steady draft that carries the scent of burning olive oil and heated bronze. You're climbing toward the beacon chamber itself, the circular room that crowns the great lighthouse and sends its light across 30 miles of Mediterranean waters. "The flame is everything," Apollodorus explains as you ascend. "Without it, we are merely a very tall building where donkeys exercise daily. With it properly tended, we become the thread that connects every ship to safety. Roman admirals have sailed by our light, Phoenician traders have blessed our beacon, and even the Queen's own vessels depend on what we do here." The circular chamber opens before you, like the inside of a bronze bowl. Curved walls rise to a domed ceiling, and in the center stands the great Bicana bronze brazier, larger than a royal dining table, filled with a precisely arranged array of wicks floating in shallow pools of olive oil. Above it, an intricate system of mirrors and polished metal reflectors captures and amplifies the flames, sending beams of light through openings that face every direction of the compass. But it's not just the flame that takes your breath awaits the engineering. The entire system rotates slowly on bronze bearings, each revolution sweeping the lighthouse's beam across a different section of the horizon. Counterweights and carefully balanced arms ensure the rotation continues smoothly, powered by nothing more than rising heat and clever mechanics that would impress engineers 2,000 years in the future. The Alexandrian mechanicians designed this, Apollodorus says with obvious pride. Men who studied at the museum and learned from Archimedes himself. They understood that a lighthouse must not simply burn, it must communicate. Watch. He adjusts a bronze lever, and the rotation slows. Another adjustment, and the beam's focus narrows to a tight column of light that he directs toward a specific ship in the harbor. You lean closer to examine the flame arrangement. Each wick floats in its own small reservoir, fed by oil that flows through bronze tubes from larger storage vessels. The system is self-regulating as oil burns. More flows in to maintain constant levels. Ingenious and simple. The kind of solution that only comes from generations of practical experience. Olive oil burns clean and steady, Apollodorus explains. but it must be the finest quality. Oil with even a trace of sediment will smoke and dim our light. The merchants of Alexandria compete for our contract. They know that oil which feeds the great lighthouse carries the reputation of their workshops to every port in the Mediterranean. He shows you how to trim the wicks, a delicate operation that requires steady hands and careful attention. Too short, and the flame weakens. Too long, and it gutters and smokes. Each wick must be adjusted individually, creating a crown of flames that burns with perfect uniformity. But the real secret, he continues, moving to the mirror array, lies in understanding light itself. These mirrors were not simply polished, they were shaped by craftsmen who studied geometry and optics. Each curve focuses the flame's light into a beam that can be seen from the horizon's edge. You watch as he demonstrates, adjusting mirrors to create different effects. A broad, sweeping light for general navigation, a focused beam for signaling specific vessels, a rapid flashing pattern that warns of storms or dangerous conditions. The lighthouse becomes an instrument of communication, its language written in patterns of light that every experienced sailor can read. The view from the beacon chamber overwhelms your senses. Alexandria spreads below like a living map. The great harbor with its forest of masts, the palace complex where Ptolemy XII holds court, the famous library with its columned porticos, where scholars from across the known world come to study. Beyond the city, the Nile Delta stretches green and fertile toward the mysterious lands of Upper Egypt. At night, Apollodorus says, this room becomes the center of the world. Ships navigate by our light from the coast of Libya to the harbors of Asia Minor. Captains set their course by our beacon, measure their progress by our steady pulse. We are the fixed point around which the entire Mediterranean turns. He hands you a bronze Tula's specialized wick trimmer, designed specifically for lighthouse work. Your first lesson begins now. The noon departures are approaching, and the harbor will soon be crowded with vessels seeking the open sea. They will look to us for the signal that conditions are favorable. You take the tool, feeling its weight and balance. The metal is warm from the beacon's heat, smoothed by countless hands that have performed this same task. Through the chamber's openings, you can see ships beginning to move, sails being raised, anchors weighed, crews preparing for journeys that might last weeks or months. Remember, Apollodorus adds with a gentle smile, every flame you tend tonight will guide someone safely home to their family. There are worse ways to spend one's life than shepherding light across dark waters. You nod, understanding that you're not just learning to maintain equipment, you're inheriting a sacred trust that connects you to every soul who travels these ancient seas. The Mediterranean stretches endless and blue beyond the harbor mouth, beautiful and dangerous in equal measure. Time to begin your education in the ancient art of keeping the light alive. The afternoon settles into a rhythm as natural as breathing. You follow Apollodorus through the lighthouse's daily routine, learning the careful choreography that keeps Alexandria's beacon burning bright. Every task has its proper time, its specific method, its small but crucial role in the larger pattern of maritime safety. First, we check the oil levels, Apollodorus explains, leading you to a series of bronze gauges that measure the fuel reserves. The beacon consumes nearly 50 ampere of oil each month, more during storms, when we must burn brighter, less during calm seasons when merchant traffic decreases. He points to markings etched into the metal. These lines tell us when to signal the harbor master for fresh supplies. Run low and ships may find darkness when they most need light. You learn to read the gauges, understanding how oil consumption varies with weather, season, and the lighthouse's operational demands. During winter storms, when desperate ships fight mountainous waves to reach Alexandria's safety, the beacon burns at maximum intensity for days at a time. Summer brings calmer seas but increased traffic. As favorable winds draw merchant fleets from across the Mediterranean, the supply system fascinates you with its elegant simplicity. Oil arrives in large clay amphora, each one sealed and marked with the producer's stamp. The finest oil comes from the sacred groves of Athena near Athens, pressed from olives picked at precisely the right moment, and transported in ships designed specifically for liquid cargo. Lesser grades suffice for the lighthouse's secondary functions lubricating the rotating mechanism, feeding the smaller guidance lamps, maintaining the donkey's harnesses. Quality matters more than quantity, Apollodorus notes, opening an amphora to let you smell the oil within. The scent is clean and pure, with just a hint of the olive's natural fragrance. Poor oil creates smoke that dims our mirrors and confuses our signals. Ship captains learn to recognize the quality of a lighthouse by the clarity of its beam, and Alexandria's reputation rests on maintaining the finest light in the Mediterranean. You help him transfer oil from storage jars to the feeding system, using bronze funnels and measures that prevent spills and waste. Every drop is precious, not just for its cost, but for its role in keeping the beacon alive. The oil flows through bronze pipes with the smooth efficiency of engineering refined over generations. Next comes mirror maintenance, a task requiring patience and precision. Each bronze reflector must be polished daily to maintain its brilliance, using soft cloths and special compounds that remove salt residue without scratching the mirror's surface. You learn to work systematically, checking each mirror's angle and adjustment, ensuring the light patterns remain consistent and true. The mirrors tell stories, Apollodorus says, pointing to tiny imperfections in one bronze surface. This one bears the mark of a Mediterranean storm that lasted 3 days, hail, the size of figs striking the lighthouse, while we fought to keep the beacon burning. And this one, he indicates another mirror with a small dent, took damage when a Roman galley fired a greeting salute too close to the harbor. Their enthusiasm exceeded their judgment. The afternoon brings a steady parade of ships seeking departure signals. You watch Apollodorus read the sea conditions with the skill of a born mariner, interpreting cloud formations, wind patterns, and wave behavior to determine which vessels should sail and which should wait for better conditions. A sleek Egyptian grain ship receives 3 quick flashes, fair winds, and clear sailing 2 roads. A heavily loaded Roman merchantman gets a single long beam toward the southern channel, where deeper water accommodates its substantial draft. A fishing fleet preparing for night work receives a complex pattern of signals indicating the best grounds for their nets. Each captain knows our language, Apollodorus explains. Lighthouse signals are standardized from Gades to Byzantium, though each beacon adds its own local knowledge. Alexandria's patterns are copied by lighthouses across the Mediterranean. We set the standard for maritime communication. You begin to appreciate the lighthouse keeper's dual role as navigator and communicator. Reading weather requires understanding the sea's moods, how morning mists indicate afternoon calms, how certain cloud formations predict wind shifts, how the behavior of seabirds reveals changing atmospheric pressure. The ancient Mediterranean mariners navigate by accumulated wisdom rather than instruments, and the lighthouse keeper serves as their link to centuries of nautical knowledge. As evening approaches, you help prepare the great beacon for night operation. The daytime mirror configuration changes to accommodate darkness, creating broader, more powerful beams that can penetrate fog and guide ships across greater distances. Additional wicks are lit to increase the flame's intensity and the rotation. Speed adjusts to provide more frequent sweeps of the horizon. Tonight will be your first full watch, Apollodorus tells you, checking the oil levels one final time. The sea never sleeps, so neither can we. Ships travel by darkness to avoid the heat of summer days, and they depend on our light to find safe harbor. You feel the weight of responsibility settling comfortably on your shoulders. Below, Alexandria prepares for evening, cooking fires beginning to flicker in countless homes, oil lamps being lit in the great library, torches illuminating the palace courtyards where Ptolemaic nobles conduct their evening business. But up here in the beacon chamber, your concerns are simpler and more immediate. Flame, fuel, mirrors, and the endless procession of ships that trust their lives to the light you tend. It's honest work with clear purpose, and you find yourself looking forward to the quiet hours when the lighthouse becomes the Mediterranean's brightest star. The sun begins its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Time to light the beacon and begin your first night as keeper of Alexandria's great light. The harbor transforms as afternoon melts into evening, and you discover that Alexandria's port never truly sleeps. It simply changes its rhythm like a great musician shifting from one movement to another. from your elevated perch in the lighthouse. The view spreads like a living tapestry woven from commerce, tradition, and the eternal dance between land and sea. Below, the great harbor bustles with preparations for night. Fishing boats that rested through the hot afternoon hours now come alive with activity. Crews emerge from shaded taverns where they've spent the day mending nets and sharing stories, their sun-darkened hands already reaching for ropes and oars. These smaller vessels will work the night waters when fish rise from the cool depths. To feed, their catches destined for Alexandria's markets before dawn. Watch the fishermen, Apollodorus suggests, joining you at the western window. They read the water like scholars read papyrus. See how that crew tests their nets, one final time. They know tonight's winds will drive the fish toward the eastern reefs. And those men loading extra oil for their lamps, they expect fog before midnight. You observe the intricate choreography of departure. Each fishing boat follows customs, refined over generations. Nets are blessed with a few drops of wine poured over the bow. Captains burn small offerings of incense to Poseidon, the aromatic smoke drifting across the water. Young boys race between vessels carrying messages, coins, and last-minute supplies, their bare feet sure on wet planking. The larger merchant vessels present a different spectacle entirely. Massive grain ships from the Nile Delta prepare for overnight journeys to Rhodes and Cyprus, their holds heavy with wheat that will feed distant cities. Roman merchantmen take on fresh water and final passengers, traders, scholars, and diplomats whose business cannot wait for daylight travel. One particularly impressive vessel catches your attention. A Phoenician trader with purple-dyed sails and a hull decorated with intricate bronze fittings. Its crew speaks in rapid, musical syllables as they secure amphorae containing precious goods, Syrian glass, Arabian incense, and Indian spices that will command premium prices in western ports. That captain has sailed these waters for 30 years, Apollodorus notes, following your gaze, his father before him, and his grandfather before that. Phoenician navigators carry the sea in their blood. They can smell land from 50 miles away and predict storms from the way dolphins play. In the waves, dock workers stream across the great harbor's stone quays, their movements efficient despite the approaching darkness. Some carry torches that cast dancing shadows across stacked cargo, Egyptian pottery, Nubian gold, papyrus scrolls bound for libraries in distant cities. Others tend the complex system of ropes and pulleys that manages Alexandria's massive grain exports, ensuring Rome's bread supply flows smoothly across the Mediterranean. The famous lighthouse of Pharos isn't the harbor's only source of illumination. Smaller beacon fires burn on strategic points around the port, guide lights that mark safe channels, warn of underwater obstacles, and provide reference points for night navigation. Each flame serves a specific purpose in the greater pattern of maritime safety. Alexandria handles more cargo than any other port in the Mediterranean, Apollodorus explains with obvious pride. Goods arrive from the heart of Africa, travel down the Nile, and depart for every corner of the known world. Roman senators dine on grain we've loaded, Athenian philosophers write on papyrus we've shipped, and Persian nobles burn incense that passed through our warehouses. You watch stevedores loading a Roman galley with an eclectic cargo, rolls of finest Egyptian linen, cages containing exotic birds from Nubia, sealed jars of precious natron used in mummification, and wooden boxes that probably contain jewelry or perfumes. Each item represents trade networks that span continents, connecting Alexandria to markets from Britain to India. The harbor's ethnic diversity amazes you. Egyptian dockhands work alongside Greek merchants. Roman officials consult with Phoenician captains, and Jewish traders negotiate with Arab camel drivers who've brought goods across desert routes. Alexandria serves as the Mediterranean's great mixing bowl, where cultures blend as naturally as wine and water. As darkness deepens, the fishing fleet begins its exodus. Dozens of boats slip away from their moorings like ghosts, their small oil lamps creating streams of light across the dark water. The sight is hauntingly beautiful, constellation of vessels following ancient patterns, known only to themselves and the fish they seek. Each fishing captain guards his knowledge jealously. Apollodorus chuckles. They know which reefs hold the best catch, which currents bring schools of tuna, which phases of the moon favor their nets. Some families have fished these waters since Alexander himself founded the city. The larger merchant vessels wait for full darkness before departing, their captains preferring to navigate by stars rather than the deceptive light of late evening. You can see crews making final preparations, checking rigging, securing cargo, offering prayers to whatever gods watch over travelers who commit their lives to wind and wave. A gentle breeze carries the mingled scents of the harbor, salt air, burning oil, spices, tar, fresh bread from waterfront bakeries, and the faint perfume of lotus blossoms from the palace gardens. It's a smell unique to Alexandria, as distinctive as a signature and as complex as the city itself. You realize you're witnessing one of history's great ports, at the height of its power and prosperity. Every ship that departs carries a piece of Alexandria's wealth and wisdom to distant shores, while every arrival brings new goods, ideas, and stories to enrich the city's already cosmopolitan character. The Mediterranean stretches endlessly beyond the harbor mouth, dark and mysterious, under the emerging stars. As the harbor settles into its evening rhythm, Apollodorus leads you down to the lighthouse's lower quarters, where the day-to-day business of keeping the beacon alive takes on a more human scale. The stone walls here are warmed by reflected heat from the great flame above, and small oil lamps cast dancing shadows that make the ancient masonry seem alive with gentle movement. Even lighthouse keepers must eat, Apollodorus says with a gentle laugh, gesturing toward a simple wooden table set near one of the larger windows. Though our dining room offers views that would make Ptolemy himself envious, the meal is beautifully simple: fresh bread, still warm from Alexandria's bakeries, olives cured in herbs and sea salt, white cheese made from goats that graze the desert edges, and fish so recently caught that it still carries the clean scent of deep water. A clay pitcher holds wine mixed with honey and water, the traditional drink that sustains working men through long nights of labor. You tear off a piece of bread, surprised by its excellent quality. The grain is fine and well milled, the crust golden and crackling, the interior soft and aromatic. The lighthouse receives provisions from the city's best suppliers. Apollodorus explains, "We are considered essential workers. Our well-being directly affects the safety of every ship that enters or leaves Alexandria's harbor." The fish, grilled simply over olive wood coals, flakes perfectly under your bronze eating knife. Its flavor speaks of the deep Mediterranean, clean and rich, without any trace of the muddy taste that comes from lesser waters. Caught this morning by the crew of the Isis's Blessing, Apollodorus notes, Captain Demetrios always saves his finest catch for the lighthouse. His grandfather's ship was saved by our beacon during the great storm 30 years past. You dip bread in the olive oil, tasting the liquid gold that fuels both your beacon and your bodies. The oil is extraordinarily smooth, fruity, with just enough bite to remind you of the ancient trees that produced it. From groves near Memphis, Apollodorus says, noticing your appreciation, the priests of Ptah maintain olive trees that were planted when Alexander was still a young prince in Macedonia. As you eat, Apollodorus shares stories that illuminate the lighthouse's role in Alexandria's daily life. He tells of Roman admirals who've climbed these very stairs to study navigation techniques, of Ptolemaic queens who've visited to observe astronomical measurements, of scholars from the Great Library who use the lighthouse as a platform for studying the movements of stars and planets. "We are more than beacon keepers," he explains, refilling your wine cup. "We serve as weather predictors for the harbor master, navigation consultants for visiting captains, and sometimes even as witnesses to history. From this tower, I watched Caesar's ships arrive 30 years ago, their red sails filling the horizon like scattered poppies. The cheese, made from milk of desert goats, has a temp that perfectly complements the mild wine. You learn that it comes from Bedouin herders who've traded with Alexandria since the city's founding, their animals perfectly adapted to the harsh lands beyond the Nile Delta. These nomadic people navigate the desert by stars, just as sailors navigate the sea, following ancient routes that connect oasis to oasis across seemingly impossible distances. The lighthouse connects us to every corner of the Mediterranean world," Apollodorus continues, gesturing toward the window where ships' lights twinkle like fallen stars. That grain vessel departing for Rome carries wheat that will become bread for senators and citizens alike. The Phoenician trader bound for Gades carries Egyptian perfumes that will scent the bodies of Spanish nobles. We are the thread that binds the civilized world together. The conversation flows as smoothly as the wine, punctuated by comfortable silences, when you both simply watch the harbor's evening activities. A large Roman galley departs with measured oar strokes, its bronze ram cutting clean furrows through calm water. Fishing boats continue their exodus toward productive grounds, their small lights creating moving constellations on the dark sea. Apollodorus shares practical wisdom accumulated over decades of lighthouse service. He explains how to predict fog by watching the way evening mist gathers around certain islands, how to read wind patterns from the behavior of seabirds, how to identify different types of vessels by their sailing characteristics even at great distances. The sea teaches everything, if you learn her language, he says, draining his wine cup. Storms announce themselves days in advance, through subtle changes in wave patterns. Schools of fish betray their presence by the way light reflects off disturbed water. Even the phases of the moon affect how clearly our beacon penetrates night. Air. You taste the wine more thoughtfully, appreciating its complexity. The honey adds sweetness without cloying. The water prevents intoxication during long working hours. And the wine itself carries flavors of the Egyptian sun and soil that produced the grapes. It's a drink designed for men who must remain alert through the dark hours while still finding comfort against the night's chill. As the meal concludes, you realize this simple dinner represents something profound about ancient life. The way work, sustenance, and community interweave into patterns that give meaning to daily existence. The lighthouse keeper's role extends beyond mechanical duties to encompass a deeper responsibility for the welfare of all who travel these waters. Tomorrow, Apollodorus says, rising from the table, I will teach you to read the weather signs that every keeper must know. Tonight, we simply tend the flame and watch over those who trust their lives to our light. You help clear the simple dishes, already feeling the rhythm of lighthouse life settling into your bones like a familiar song. The transition from day to night brings a profound change to the lighthouse's character, as if the ancient structure awakens to its true purpose. Apollodorus leads you back up the helical ramp to the beacon chamber, where the great flame now burns with steady intensity, its light multiplied and focused by the carefully arranged mirrors into beams that reach across the darkening Mediterranean. Night is when we truly earn our keep, Apollodorus says, adjusting the oil flow to increase the beacon's brilliance. During daylight, ships navigate by landmarks and coastal features. In darkness, they depend entirely on our guidance to find safe passage through Alexandria's complex harbor approaches. You help them reconfigure the mirror array for nocturnal operations. The daytime arrangement, optimized for signaling and communication, gives way to a more powerful system designed to penetrate fog, illuminate dangerous obstacles, and provide steady reference points for navigation. Each mirror adjustment changes the pattern of light that sweeps across the water, creating a unique signature that experienced captains recognize from miles away. The beacon chamber fills with warmth and the steady sound of burning oil, creating an almost meditative atmosphere. Through the circular openings, Alexandria's lights begin to twinkle like earthbound stars, oil lamps in countless homes, torches along the great harbor's quays, and the distinctive glow of the famous library where scholars work through the night, copying manuscripts and conducting research. The first rule of night-keeping, Apollodorus instructs, is vigilance without anxiety. We must remain alert to every ship that approaches our light, ready to provide guidance or warning as needed. But we cannot allow worry to exhaust us. The night is long, and panic serves no one. A ship's horn sounds from the harbor mouth, 3 long blasts that signal a vessel requesting passage guidance. Apollodorus immediately adjusts to mirrors, sending a precise pattern of flashes toward the approaching craft. Roman grain ship, heavily loaded, drawing deep water, he explains. The captain is requesting confirmation of the safe channel depth. You watch the exchange of signals with fascination. The ship responds with 2 horn blasts, indicating understanding of the lighthouse's guidance. Apollodorus then activates a different set of mirrors, creating a steady beam that illuminates the harbor's deepest approach channel, allowing the heavily loaded vessel to navigate safely toward the quays where it will discharge cargo bound for Rome's ever-hungry population. Each ship has its own personality, Apollodorus notes as the Roman vessel moves steadily toward the harbor. Grain ships are cautious and methodical. They cannot afford risks when carrying food for millions. Warships are direct and confident, their captains trained to navigate in any conditions. Merchant vessels vary widely. Some captains are bold, to the point of recklessness, others so careful they waste favorable winds waiting for perfect conditions. The lighthouse's rotation mechanism continues its steady revolution, sweeping the beacon's light in precise patterns across different sectors of the sea. You learn to coordinate with this rhythm, timing your mirror adjustments to maximize the effectiveness of each sweep. It's like conducting an orchestra of light, each beam timed to reach specific points at exactly the right moment. As full darkness settles over the Mediterranean, more ships begin to appear on the horizon. Their approach lights twinkle like moving stars, each one representing a vessel full of people whose lives depend on safe navigation. Phoenician traders returning from Spanish ports with silver and copper, Egyptian fishing boats heading toward productive grounds near the delta, Greek passenger ships carrying philosophers, merchants, and diplomats between the great cities of the ancient world. The loneliness of night-keeping takes some adjustment, Apollodorus warns gently. Up here, surrounded by the sea and stars, a man can feel very small and isolated. But remember, we are never truly alone. Every light on the water represents human lives, human hopes, human journeys that we help complete safely. You find the solitude oddly comforting, rather than oppressive. The beacon chamber feels like the bridge of a ship sailing through the night sky, its steady light connecting you to every vessel within sight. The responsibility is weighty, but not burdensome, more like being entrusted with something precious that must be protected and shared. A fishing boat approaches from the east, its captain signaling a request for current information. Fish move with the tides and currents, and experienced fishermen know that lighthouse keepers observe water conditions constantly. Apollodorus responds with a complex pattern of flashes that indicates favorable currents near the northern reefs, information that will help the fishermen find productive waters for their night's work. We serve as much more than navigation aids, he explains. Fishermen rely on our current reports, merchants seek our weather predictions, and naval commanders consult our observations of ship movements. The lighthouse becomes the hub of maritime information for the entire region. The great flame burns steadily in its bronze brazier, fed by the constant flow of precious olive oil. You check the fuel levels and adjust the wick configurations, already beginning to develop the careful habits that keep the beacon burning through the longest nights. The work is both simple and profound in fire, adjusting mirrors, watching the sea, guiding travelers safely home. A gentle breeze stirs through the chamber's openings, carrying the scents of the nighttime Mediterranean salt air, distant lands, and the faint aroma of cooking fires from ships anchored in the harbor. You realize you're witnessing one of history's most important maritime crossroads during its golden age, when Alexandria served as the bridge between Africa, Asia, and Europe. Your first night watch has begun, and already you feel the ancient rhythm of the lighthouse keepers calling settling into your soul. The night deepens around the lighthouse like a vast, star-scattered cloak, and you discover that the midnight hours possess their own unique character, quieter than evening's bustle, yet alive with subtle activities that only reveal themselves to patient observation. The great beacon continues its steady revolution, casting sweeping beams across waters that shimmer with reflected starlight and the distant glow of ship lanterns. Apollodorus settles into a comfortable wooden chair, positioned to overlook the harbor's main approaches, his weathered hands moving automatically to adjust oil flows and mirror angles with the unconscious grace of decades spent in this precise routine. The deep night teaches different lessons than day or evening, he murmurs, his voice soft, to avoid disturbing the chamber's meditative atmosphere. Ships move more cautiously, captains rely more heavily on celestial navigation, and we become their primary link to safety. You learn to read the subtle language of nighttime maritime activity, A ship approaching with lanterns hung in a specific pattern indicates a vessel carrying precious cargo, gold, silver, or rare goods that require extra protection. 3 quick horn blasts followed by 2 long ones signal a ship with sick passengers, requesting medical assistance from Alexandria's renowned physicians. A series of bright torch flashes from a vessel's deck means urgent messages await delivery to the city's officials. The Mediterranean reveals different personalities under darkness. During daylight, it appears as a busy highway, crowded with commercial traffic. At night, it becomes something more mysterious and ancient, a vast realm, where individual ships seem like brave spirits, crossing an ethereal landscape lit only by stars and the distant glow of coastal beacons. Watch that constellation rising. In the east, Apollodorus points toward a group of stars climbing above the horizon. Navigators call it the crown of Ariadne, and its position tells them the exact hour of night better than any water clock. Ships time their arrivals by star positions, planning to reach harbor entrances precisely when tide and wind conditions favor safe passage. You observe a large merchant vessel adjusting its course based on stellar observations, its captain using an astrolabe to measure the angle between horizon and key navigation stars. The ancient art of celestial navigation fascinates human finding their way across trackless waters by reading patterns written in lights millions of miles away. No maps or instruments could guide them with the precision available from patient study of the night sky. The lighthouse's fuel consumption increases during these dark hours, as the beacon must burn brighter to penetrate the deeper gloom. You help Apollodorus monitor the oil levels, learning to calculate consumption rates and predict when fresh supplies will be needed. Each amphora of oil represents olives grown in distant groves, pressed by skilled craftsmen, transported by merchant ships, and stored with careful attention to quality and purity. The Romans consume enormous quantities of Egyptian grain, Apollodorus explains, as another heavily loaded vessel departs toward Italy. Every month, dozens of grain ships leave Alexandria, carrying wheat that will become bread for Rome's million citizens. Our beacon guides the departure of food that prevents revolution in the empire's capital. A fishing fleet returns from the eastern waters, their nets heavy with the night's catch. You watch them navigate the harbor entrance with practiced skill, their small oil lamps creating moving patterns of light on the dark water. These men know every reef, every current, every seasonal change in these waters. Their families have fished here since Alexander founded the city 3 centuries ago. The sounds of night on the water carry clearly through the still air, the creak of rigging, the splash of oars, the distant calls of captains communicating with their crews. Occasionally, you hear singing drifting from ships at anchor, sailors passing the dark hours with traditional songs that connect them to homes they may not see for months. Each culture has its own maritime traditions, Apollodorus notes, recognizing a distinctive melody from a Phoenician vessel. Those sailors are singing the hymn of safe passage, asking their sea goddess to grant favorable winds and calm waters. Roman crews prefer marching songs that keep oarsmen in rhythm. Greek fishermen sing about legendary catches and mythical sea creatures. The beacon chamber becomes a sanctuary of light in the vast darkness, its steady flame providing comfort not just to ships at sea, but to everyone within sight of its glow. From Alexandria's highest point, you can see the entire city spread below residential districts where families sleep peacefully. The palace complex where Ptolemaic rulers conduct nighttime councils. The great library where scholars work by lamplight translating texts from every corner of the known world. A messenger ship arrives from the direction of Cyprus, its urgent signals indicating important news for Alexandria's officials. These swift vessels carry dispatches between Mediterranean cities, linking the ancient world's great centers of power and commerce. Their arrival often means political developments, trade negotiations, or military movements that will affect thousands of lives. You tend the great flame with growing confidence, trimming wicks and adjusting fuel flows to maintain perfect combustion. The work requires constant attention, but not frantic activity, more like shepherding a sacred fire that must never be allowed to falter. The bronze brazier radiates warmth that makes the night watch comfortable, even when winter winds sweep across the sea. The loneliest hour approaches, Apollodorus warns gently. Just before dawn, When the night seems endless and the sea appears empty of life, that's when lighthouse keepers must draw strength from their sense of duty and the knowledge that somewhere, beyond the horizon, ships depend on our steadfast attention. You understand what he means as the night deepens toward its darkest point, when even the most determined travelers seek shelter and the Mediterranean becomes a realm of patient waiting. The pre-dawn hours bring a magical transformation to the Mediterranean world, as if the sea and sky conspire to create moments of perfect tranquility before the day's activities resume. The lighthouse beacon continues its faithful rotation, but now it illuminates a waterscape painted in subtle shades of deep blue and silver, where the boundary between sea and sky becomes beautifully ambiguous. You stand beside Apollodorus at the chamber's eastern opening, watching the first fishing boats prepare for their dawn exodus. These vessels represent a different breed of maritime activity, smaller, more intimate, guided by generations of inherited knowledge about where fish gather as darkness gives way to light. Their crews move with the quiet efficiency of men who understand that success depends on reading nature's most subtle signals. The fishermen know secrets that even we lighthouse keepers must respect. Apollodorus observes, his voice soft in the pre-dawn stillness. They understand how water temperature affects fish behavior, how moon phases influence feeding patterns, how the slightest change in current direction can mean the difference between empty nets and abundant catches. You watch one crew preparing their nets with ceremonial care, each man performing tasks perfected through years of repetition. The net mender checks every knot and splice, understanding that a single weak point could mean losing an entire night's work. The captain burns a small offering of incense to Poseidon, asking the sea god's blessing on their endeavor. Young apprentices arrange the nets and precise patterns that will allow for quick deployment once they reach the fishing grounds. The boats themselves are marvels of practical design, shallow-drafted vessels that can navigate the reefs and shallows, where fish congregate, yet seaworthy enough to handle the Mediterranean's sudden mood changes. Their hulls are treated with a mixture of pine pitch and olive oil that protects against shipworms while remaining flexible enough to ride the waves rather than fight them. Each fishing boat represents a family enterprise, Apollodorus explains. That vessel with the blue-painted prow belongs to the sons of Nicias, whose grandfather pioneered the technique of night fishing near the eastern reefs. The boat with the carved dolphin figurehead is owned by the widows Antippi, who took over her husband's business and now employs a crew of 12 men. You begin to understand the complex social networks that sustain Alexandria's maritime economy. Fishing families intermarry with boat builders, net makers marry the daughters of sail weavers, and successful captains invest their profits in training young apprentices who will eventually command their own vessels. The harbor represents not just commercial activity, but a living community bound together by shared dependence on the sea's bounty. The lighthouse's beacon serves these fishermen in ways you hadn't previously considered. Its steady light provides a reference point for navigation, but more importantly, it offers psychological comfort to men who spend dark hours on waters that can turn deadly without warning. The knowledge that the great flame burns steadily gives them confidence to venture farther from shore, to try productive fishing grounds that would be too risky, without a reliable beacon to guide them home. As the first fishing boats slip away from their moorings, you notice how differently they move compared to the merchant vessels, where cargo ships progress with steady, measured progress. Fishing boats start and weave like seabirds, their captains constantly adjusting course based on subtle changes in water color, wave patterns, and wind direction. The best fishing captains possess almost supernatural sensitivity to the sea's moods, Apollodorus notes. They can sense underwater currents by the way surface waves interact, predict fish movements by observing seabird behavior, and navigate through fog by recognizing the unique sound patterns that different shorelines create when waves break against them. You watch one particularly skillful captain guide his vessel through the harbor entrance, his boat responding to helm adjustments, so subtle they're almost invisible. The man doesn't simply steer his craft, he converses with it, achieving a harmony between human intention and maritime physics that speaks of lifetime dedication to the sailor's art. The pre-dawn light begins to reveal the fishing fleet's destination, a series of underwater reefs and ridges, where Mediterranean currents create upwelling that brings nutrients to the surface. These feeding grounds have supported Alexandria's fishing industry since the city's founding, their locations passed down through generations of families who guard their knowledge as carefully as temple priests protect sacred mysteries. Fishing represents one of humanity's oldest relationships with the sea, Apollodorus reflects. Long before men learned to build great ships for commerce or war, they waded into shallow waters with simple nets, seeking sustenance from the oceans. Abundance, these fishermen carry forward traditions that predate written history. The boats grow smaller as they approach their fishing grounds, their oil lamps creating tiny constellations that mirror the stars reflected in the calm water. You realize you're witnessing a scene that has played out countless times over the centuries, men venturing onto the sea in pursuit of the fish that will feed their families and fill Alexandria's markets with fresh catches. A gentle breeze carries the scent of the awakening sea salt air, mixed with the faint aroma of seaweed and the distant cooking fires of the fishing boats, where crews prepare simple meals to sustain them through their morning's work. It's a smell that connects you to the eternal rhythm of maritime life, where human persistence meets the sea's changeable generosity. The great beacon continues its steady pulse, now serving as a homing signal for the fishing fleet that will return. With the morning tide, their holds hopefully filled with the silver treasure that swims in the Mediterranean's depths. The morning brings an unexpected honor to your lighthouse duties, as a small procession of distinguished visitors begins the long climb up the helical ramp. Their voices echo through the stone chambers, learned men speaking in the precise Greek of scholars, their conversation touching on subjects that span geography, astronomy, and natural philosophy. Apollodorus straightens with obvious pleasure as the footsteps approach the beacon chamber. "Ah," he says, adjusting his simple work tunic and smoothing his white hair. "The library scholars have come for their monthly observations." These men study the movements of stars and planets, using our lighthouse as Alexandria's highest observation platform. It is an honor to assist in their work. The first to enter is a tall, dignified man with intelligent eyes and hands stained with ink from countless hours of manuscript copying. He greets Apollodorus with the familiarity of long acquaintance. Eratosthenes sends his greetings, he says, referencing the famous mathematician who once served as the library's chief librarian. "The calculations you provided last month regarding tide patterns proved invaluable for our coastal mapping project." Behind him come three younger scholars, their arms laden with bronze instruments, papyrus scrolls, and wooden tablets covered with complex mathematical notations. You recognize some of the devices: astrolabes for measuring stellar positions, sundials for precise time calculation, and graduated rods for determining angles and distances. These are the tools of men who seek to understand the universe through careful observation and mathematical analysis. "The lighthouse provides the perfect vantage point for our work," explains the lead scholar, whose name is Demetrius. "From this height, we can observe celestial phenomena without the distortion caused by heat rising from the city streets. The stability of the structure allows for precise measurements that would be impossible on a swaying ship or unstable ground." You watch with fascination as they set up their equipment near the chamber's eastern opening. The astrolabe, a intricate bronze disc covered with engraved lines and symbols, is positioned to track the apparent movement of stars across the sky. The scholars work with the methodical precision of men accustomed to measurements where the smallest error can invalidate months of calculations. Our current project involves creating accurate maps of the Mediterranean coastline, Demetrius explains to you, apparently pleased to find a new audience for their work. By measuring the angles between known stars and coastal landmarks, we can determine the precise positions of harbors, islands, and navigational hazards. This information will make sea travel safer for generations to come. Apollodorus assists them with the easy familiarity of long practice, adjusting the lighthouse's mirrors to provide better illumination for their instruments and sharing his practical knowledge of local weather patterns that might affect their observations. The collaboration between the lighthouse keeper and the scholars represents the best of Alexandria's intellectual tradition, theoretical knowledge enhanced by practical experience. The lighthouse itself serves as a crucial reference point for our calculations, One of the younger scholars notes, carefully adjusting his measuring rod. Ships navigating by our charts will use this beacon as a baseline for their own position. Calculations. Every measurement we take from this chamber helps create a more accurate understanding of Mediterranean geography. You learn that their work extends far beyond simple map-making. They're attempting to calculate the Earth's circumference using shadow measurements taken at different latitudes, determine the precise length of the year by tracking stellar positions, and create mathematical models that predict tide patterns throughout the Mediterranean basin. Knowledge builds upon knowledge, Demetrius observes, making notations on a papyrus scroll covered with geometric diagrams. The Babylonians gave us mathematical techniques for tracking planetary movements. The Egyptians provided methods for precise time measurement. We combine these traditions with Greek geometric principles to create new understanding of the natural world. The scholar's presence transforms the lighthouse chamber into a temporary observatory. Their quiet discussions touching on subjects that would influence human understanding for centuries to come. You realize you're witnessing the birth of scientific geography, as these men apply mathematical rigor to the practical problems of navigation and exploration. The sea captains who use our beacon also contribute to our work. Another scholar explains, showing you a collection of sailing reports. Written on papyrus, they record wind patterns, current directions, and seasonal variations in weather. This practical knowledge helps us understand the forces that shape Mediterranean maritime conditions. Their instruments catch the morning light streaming through the chamber's openings, bronze surfaces gleaming like captured sunlight. The astrolabe in particular seems almost magical in its complexity, a device that transforms the apparent chaos of stellar movement into orderly, mathematical relationships that can be calculated and predicted. The lighthouse represents more than navigation aid, Demetrius reflects, pausing in his calculations to gaze out at the harbor below. It symbolizes humanity's determination to bring order and safety to the natural world. Every ship that reaches port safely validates our belief that knowledge can triumph over the chaos of wind and wave. You help them position a large bronze mirror to reflect sunlight onto their measuring instruments, understanding that you're participating in work that transcends the immediate needs of maritime commerce. These scholars are building an intellectual foundation that will support navigation, exploration, and trade for generations. As they work, you gain new appreciation for the lighthouse's role in Alexandria's intellectual ecosystem. The beacon not only guides ships, but serves as a platform for advancing human knowledge of the world's true size, shape, and navigational relationships. The morning sun climbs higher, providing the clear light that makes their precise measurements possible. The afternoon brings an ominous change to the Mediterranean's character. As dark clouds begin gathering on the western horizon like an advancing army of shadows, you feel the atmospheric pressure dropping. Notice how the seabirds alter their flight patterns, and observe the subtle shift in wave motion that experienced mariners recognize as the harbinger of serious weather. Apollodorus moves with increased urgency, his 3 decades of lighthouse experience telling him that a significant storm approaches Alexandria's waters. The signs are unmistakable, he says, checking the beacon's fuel reserves and adjusting the mirror array for maximum light output. See how the clouds build in layers, with those high wispy formations above the darker masses. That pattern indicates a storm system that will last through the night and into tomorrow. Every ship within 50 miles will seek shelter in our harbor. You help him prepare the lighthouse for storm conditions, learning the specific procedures that keep the beacon operational when wind and rain assault the ancient structure. Additional oil reserves are moved to the beacon chamber. Spare wicks are prepared and tested, and the mirror system is reconfigured to penetrate the reduced visibility that accompanies severe weather. The harbor below responds to the approaching storm with practiced efficiency. Ship captains who were planning afternoon departures quickly reverse their decisions, sending crews to secure additional anchor lines and remove vulnerable sails. Dock workers race to move cargo away from the quays, where storm surge might damage goods waiting for transport. The great harbor transforms from a place of departure to a refuge for vessels seeking protection from the Mediterranean's fury. Storm duty represents the lighthouse keeper's most crucial responsibility. Apollodorus explains, testing the beacon's brightness against the growing darkness of the western sky. When visibility drops to nothing and waves tower higher than houses, desperate ships depend entirely on our light to find the harbor entrance. A single moment of flame failure during a storm can mean the difference between salvation and disaster. You watch a steady stream of vessels entering the harbor, fishing boats racing to beat the weather, merchant ships abandoning their planned routes, and even a Roman naval galley seeking the protection of Alexandria's famous breakwater. Each captain follows the same ancient protocol: approach slowly, watch for the lighthouse signals that indicate safe passage, and anchor in the designated areas where their vessels won't interfere with other storm refugees. The wind begins to build, carrying the scent of rain and the electric tension that precedes serious weather. Palm trees along the harbor's edge start to sway, and you can see dust devils spinning across the desert approaches to the city. The atmospheric conditions create an almost supernatural clarity of vision. Distant mountains appear closer than usual, and the details of ships miles away seem sharper and more distinct. Each storm teaches different lessons about the sea's power. Apollodorus notes, securing loose equipment in the beacon chamber. Summer storms are violent but brief. Winter gales are persistent but predictable. And the autumn tempests that blow from the west carry the greatest danger because they can reverse direction without warning. A large grain ship from Cyprus signals frantically for guidance, its captain clearly struggling with the changing wind conditions. Apollodorus immediately responds with a series of precise light flashes that direct the vessel toward the harbor's deepest channel, where its heavy draft won't risk grounding on the sandbars that shift with every major storm. You begin to understand the lighthouse keeper's role as more than passive beacon tender during storms. He becomes an active navigator, reading weather conditions and sea states to provide real-time guidance for ships in distress. The job requires seamanship skills, meteorological knowledge, and the steady nerves of someone accustomed to making life-or-death decisions under pressure. The first raindrops arrive as large, warm drops that strike the lighthouse's stone walls. With audible impacts, the Mediterranean storm season brings precipitation that can be torrential, turning streets into rivers and creating flash floods that reshape the coastline. But the lighthouse, built on solid bedrock and designed to withstand centuries of weather, stands firm against the gathering tempest. The Romans learned storm construction from us, Apollodorus says with evident pride, patting the massive stone walls. When they build lighthouses at Portus and Ostia, they send architects to study our techniques. The great lighthouse has survived earthquakes, wars, and storms that sank entire fleets. Yet our beacon has never failed to burn. Lightning begins to flicker in the distant clouds, creating a spectacular display that illuminates the storm's towering structure. You can see the precipitation falling from the cloud base like gray curtains draped across the western sea. Ships, still caught in the open water race toward Alexandria's safety, their crews no doubt offering prayers to whatever gods protect travelers caught in nature's fury. The beacon's light grows more important with each passing minute, as natural illumination fades beneath the storm clouds. You help Apollodorus increase the flame intensity, adding extra wicks and adjusting the mirrors to create the brightest possible beam. The lighthouse must become a sun in the growing darkness, visible to ships fighting their way through mounting seas toward the promise of safe harbor. A fishing boat appears through the gloom, its small crew fighting to control their vessel in the increasingly rough conditions. The boat rises and falls on swells that grow larger by the minute, spray flying from its bow as it crashes through waves that would have been gentle ripples just hours earlier. The storm approaches Alexandria, like destiny approaching a hero in an ancient epic, inevitable, powerful, and transformative. The storm arrives with the dramatic grandeur that only the Mediterranean can provide, transforming the sea from a peaceful highway into a realm of towering waves and driving rain. From the beacon chamber, you witness nature's power on a scale that humbles human ambition. Waves that dwarf the largest ships, winds that howl through the lighthouse's stone chambers like the voices of ancient gods, and lightning that turns the dark afternoon into a stroboscopic display of raw elemental force. Through the chaos, A magnificent sight emerges from the storm-lashed waters, a royal barge of the Ptolemaic court, its purple sails struck and its golden ornaments gleaming wetly in the beacon's powerful light. Even in these conditions, the vessel moves with stately grace, its experienced crew managing the crisis with the calm competence that comes from serving Egypt's ruling dynasty. The queen's own barge, Apollodorus, shouts over the wind's roar, immediately adjusting the lighthouse's most powerful mirrors to provide maximum illumination for the approaching vessel. Cleopatra VII uses that ship for diplomatic missions too. Cyprus and Rhodes, its captain Demetrios of Naucratis, is the finest mariner in the royal fleet. You watch in fascination as the purple-sailed barge navigates the storm-tossed harbor entrance with remarkable skill. The vessel is larger than most merchant ships, but designed for speed and elegance rather than cargo capacity. Its hull gleams with gold leaf even in the gray storm light, and banners bearing the royal cartouche of the Ptolemies stream from its masts. Despite the driving rain, the royal oarsmen work in perfect synchronization, their bronze-tipped oars cutting through the churning water with mechanical precision. These men are not common rowers, but elite athletes selected for their endurance and trained to maintain rhythm even in the most challenging conditions. Their synchronized movements propel the barge forward against wind and current with impressive efficiency. Royal barges carry more than passengers, Apollodorus explains, continuously adjusting the beacon to provide optimal guidance. That vessel likely holds diplomatic correspondence, tribute from subject territories, or perhaps foreign ambassadors seeking audience with the Queen. Every journey represents Egypt's connections to the wider Mediterranean world. The barge's approach requires the lighthouse's most sophisticated navigation assistance. You help Apollodorus coordinate multiple mirror arrays, creating a series of light patterns that guide the vessel through the harbor's safest deep-water channel, while warning of submerged obstacles that become more dangerous in rough seas. Through the storm's fury, you can see figures moving on the barge's deck, not common sailors, but individuals whose posture and dress suggest noble birth or high official rank. One figure, draped in a purple cloak that marks royal status, stands near the bow, apparently unperturbed by the wild weather. The sight epitomizes the confidence of Egypt's ruling class, comfortable with luxury, yet unafraid of the natural forces that govern their maritime empire. The vessel's construction represents the highest achievement of Alexandrian shipbuilding. Its hull combines Egyptian rivercraft techniques with Mediterranean sailing innovations, creating a design that's equally at home navigating the Nile's shallow channels or crossing the open sea to distant ports. Cedar planking from Lebanon, bronze fittings cast in Alexandria's workshops, and sails woven from the finest Egyptian linen demonstrate the resources available to pharaonic engineering. The Ptolemies rule more than Egypt, Apollodorus notes. Watching the barge's expert crew manage the storm conditions, Cyprus, Cyrenaica, and parts of Asia Minor acknowledge Cleopatra's sovereignty. Royal barges like this maintain communication between the scattered territories of the Egyptian Empire. As the vessel draws closer, you can appreciate the artistry lavished on its decoration. The prow bears a golden figurehead representing Isis in her aspect as protector of seafarers, while the stern displays the royal cobra and vulture symbols of Upper and Lower Egypt. Even functional elements like cleats and rigging hardware are crafted with the aesthetic refinement expected in objects associated with divine kingship. The barge's arrival creates a stir throughout the storm-bound harbor. Other ships' crews watch respectfully as the royal vessel passes, understanding that they witness one of the Mediterranean's most powerful rulers traveling through waters made dangerous by nature's fury. The sight reinforces Alexandria's status as capital of a maritime empire that stretches across the ancient world's most important sea. You assist with the complex light signals required to guide the barge to its designated mooring at the royal harbor, a protected basin reserved exclusively for vessels serving the Ptolemaic court. The precision required for this navigation in storm conditions tests every skill you've learned during your brief time as lighthouse keeper. Even queens must respect the sea's power, Apollodorus observes as the purple-sailed vessel reaches the safety of its berth. Royal berth provides no protection against wind and wave. The Mediterranean has humbled emperors and drowned the ships of mighty admirals. Only seamanship and careful navigation ensure safe passage. The royal barge's successful arrival through the storm represents a triumph of human skill over natural chaos. Egyptian maritime expertise proving superior to the Mediterranean's violent moods. As the vessel disappears into the protected royal harbor, you realize you've witnessed a scene that perfectly captures the grandeur and confidence of Ptolemaic Egypt at the height of its maritime power. The storm continues to rage around Alexandria, but within the great harbor's protection, civilization maintains its ancient rhythms even in nature's wildest moments. As the storm gradually abates and the last stragglers find refuge in Alexandria's protective embrace, the lighthouse settles into a different rhythm, one of solitary contemplation that comes with the deepening night. The beacon chamber, which buzzed with urgent activity during the tempest, now becomes a sanctuary of quiet reflection, where the steady flame casts dancing shadows on ancient stone walls. Apollodorus moves through his evening routines with the meditative grace of a temple priest, checking oil levels, adjusting mirror angles, and monitoring the beacon's steady pulse. The storm has passed, but its aftermath requires vigilant attention. Ships at anchor need constant guidance. Harbor conditions change hourly as wind and wave patterns settle, and the lighthouse keeper must remain alert for vessels that might still struggle toward safety through the night. This is when the true character of lighthouse keeping reveals itself. Apollodorus says softly, settling into his observation chair with a sigh of contentment. The dramatic moments, storms, emergencies, royal arrivals capture attention and create stories, but the quiet hours, when we simply tend the flame and watch over sleeping ships, represent the deeper meaning of our calling. You understand what he means as you take your position at the eastern window, gazing out over the harbor, where dozens of vessels rest at anchor like sleeping seabirds. Each ship carries its own cargo of human hopes and dreams, merchants hoping for profitable trades, pilgrims journeying to distant temples, scholars carrying precious manuscripts between the great libraries of the ancient world. The lighthouse's beam sweeps across this peaceful scene with hypnotic regularity, its light touching masts and rigging, illuminating the gentle movement of boats responding to residual swells from the departed storm. There's something profoundly comforting about this rhythm, the steady pulse of illumination that connects every vessel to the protective presence watching over them from Alexandria's highest tower. We are guardians of more than navigation, Apollodorus reflects, his voice taking on the philosophical tone that comes naturally to men who spend long hours contemplating the sea. Every ship that finds safe harbor because of our light carries part of the Mediterranean's great conversation, exchange of goods, ideas, and cultures that make civilization possible. The solitude of night watch creates space for deeper understanding of the lighthouse keeper's role in the ancient world's complex web of connections. You're not simply maintaining a beacon, you're preserving a vital thread in the network that binds together the diverse peoples and cultures surrounding the Mediterranean basin. Through the chamber's openings, the sounds of the harbor drift upward, the gentle lapping of waves against stone quays, the creak of anchor lines adjusting to tidal changes, occasional voices from ship crews maintaining their night watches. These sounds create a symphony of maritime peace, the natural music of a port at rest after weathering nature's fury. A small fishing boat moves quietly through the anchorage, its crew checking on vessels that might have dragged anchor during the storm. These harbor guardians represent another layer of Alexandria's maritime safety network. Experienced local sailors who know every reef, every current, every seasonal change that affects their waters. The lighthouse connects us to every corner of the known world, Apollodorus continues, adjusting a mirror to better illuminate a section of the harbor where several merchant vessels rest close together. That grain ship arrived from the Black Sea ports, carrying wheat grown in the fertile valleys of the Crimea. The vessel beside it brings silk from the far reaches of Asia, traded through caravan routes that cross the entire continent. You begin to appreciate how the lighthouse serves as more than a navigation. It functions as a symbol of stability and continuity in a world where political boundaries shift, empires rise and fall, and trade routes change with the fortunes of war and diplomacy. The steady flame represents something permanent, and reliable in the midst of historical change. The beacon's light reveals details of ship construction that speak to their diverse origins. Roman vessels with their characteristic broad beams and sturdy construction, Greek ships displaying the elegant lines that prioritize speed and maneuverability, Egyptian river boats adapted for coastal trading, their shallow drafts allowing access to harbors that larger vessels cannot reach. Ship design tells the story of its builder's relationship with the sea. Apollodorus notes, following your gaze, the Phoenicians created vessels optimized for long-distance exploration. The Romans built ships to carry maximum cargo with minimum risk. We Egyptians developed boats that could navigate both river and sea, connecting the Nile's wealth to Mediterranean markets. The night deepens around the lighthouse like a comfortable embrace, and you find yourself settling into the contemplative state that seems natural to this ancient calling. The responsibility is serious, but not burdensome, more like being entrusted with a sacred trust that connects you to centuries of keepers who have maintained this same vigil. A gentle breeze carries the mingled scents of the harbor salt air, tar, exotic spices, and the lingering ozone smell that follows storms. It's an aroma unique to great ports, where the products of distant lands mingle with local maritime traditions to create something entirely distinctive. You realize that lighthouse keeping represents one of humanity's most enduring professions, requiring the same basic skills and dedication whether practiced in ancient Alexandria or any other era when ships depend on coastal beacons for safe passage. The pre-dawn hours bring a profound shift in your understanding of what it means to be a lighthouse keeper, as the accumulated experiences of your time in ancient Alexandria crystallize into something approaching wisdom. The great beacon continues its eternal rotation, but now you see it differently. Not merely as a navigation tool, but as a sacred trust, connecting you to the vast community of souls who depend on its steady light for their safety and livelihood. Sits quietly in his chair, his weathered hands folded in his lap, watching the harbor with the patient attention of someone who has learned to read meaning in the smallest details. The storm's aftermath has left the water unusually calm, creating mirror-like reflections that double the number of anchor lights twinkling in the darkness. Each reflected flame seems to emphasize the lighthouse's role as guardian of this peaceful scene. 37 years I have tended this flame, he says softly, his voice carrying the weight of accumulated experience. I have guided ships through storms that could have destroyed fleets, watched the harbor fill with vessels fleeing from pirates, and seen royal barges carry the fate of empires past this very window. Yet the most important moments have been the quiet ones, nights like this, when we simply maintain the light and trust that it serves purposes we may never fully understand. You feel the truth of his words settling into your bones like winter cold or summer warmth. The lighthouse keeper's calling transcends the mechanical tasks of fuel management and mirror adjustment. It represents a form of service that connects the keeper to every traveler who has ever sought safe harbor, every family waiting for a loved one's return from the sea, every merchant whose prosperity depends on the safe passage of their goods. The eastern horizon shows the first subtle signs of approaching dawn, not the dramatic colors of sunrise, but the almost imperceptible lightning that experienced watchers recognize as the night's first surrender to day. This transitional time possesses its own character. When the boundary between darkness and light becomes beautifully ambiguous, the lighthouse chooses its keepers. Apollodorus continues, his gaze fixed on the slowly changing sky, not through any mystical process, but through the simple fact that some people find peace in solitude, purpose in responsibility, and meaning in service to strangers they will never meet. The work requires a particular temperament, patient but alert, steady but adaptable, confident but humble before the sea's power. You understand that you possess this temperament, recognizing it in the way the lighthouse's rhythms have become natural to you. How the responsibility for other people's safety feels comfortable rather than burdensome. How the solitude of night watch provides space for contemplation rather than loneliness. A small fishing boat moves silently through the harbor, its crew preparing for the day's first expedition to the eastern reefs. Their quiet efficiency speaks of generations of accumulated knowledge, family traditions passed down through fathers and sons, who have worked these waters since Alexandria's founding. They represent the human scale of maritime life, not the grand drama of royal barges or the commercial importance of grain fleets, but the daily persistence of people who make their living from the sea's bounty. Every lighthouse keeper becomes part of a brotherhood that spans centuries. Apollodorus reflects, the man who tended this beacon before me, and the one before him, and all the way back to the first keeper who lit the original flame when Alexander's city was young. We share the same concerns, the same satisfactions, the same understanding of what it means to serve as the fixed point around which the maritime world revolves. The beacon's light continues its steady sweep, now illuminating the gentle movement of ships responding to the morning tide. The sight reinforces your growing understanding of the lighthouse's role in the natural rhythms that govern Mediterranean life. Tides, winds, seasons, and weather patterns all influence the movement of vessels, but the lighthouse remains constant, the reliable reference point that allows navigation to proceed safely despite these variables. The Romans will probably conquer Egypt eventually, Apollodorus says with the calm acceptance of someone who has lived through many political changes. Empires rise and fall, borders shift, rulers change, but the lighthouse will endure, because ships will always need guidance, and the Mediterranean will always require safe harbors. The beacon transcends politics, it serves human need rather than national ambition. You realize he's preparing you for the time when you will carry the responsibility alone, when your hands will tend the flame and your eyes will watch over the ships that depend on Alexandria's light. The prospect feels natural rather than daunting, like accepting an inheritance that has been waiting for you since time began. The harbor begins to stir with the first activities of dawn, fishing boats preparing for departure, merchant crews checking their vessels after the storm, harbor officials beginning their rounds. The lighthouse has shepherded them all through another night, and now it prepares to guide them through another day of maritime activity. The greatest reward of lighthouse keeping, Apollodorus concludes, comes not from the dramatic rescues or the famous ships we guide to safety, but from the knowledge that we maintain something essential and eternal. As long as humans travel the seas, they will need beacons to guide them home. You feel the weight and honor of this ancient responsibility settling around you like a comfortable cloak, understanding that you have found your place in the great pattern of Mediterranean life. As your time as lighthouse keeper reaches its culmination, the eternal rhythm of the great lighthouse continues its ancient dance with the Mediterranean dawn. The beacon's steady pulse has become part of your heartbeat, its rotating light sweeping across waters that connect the civilized world in an endless web of commerce, diplomacy, and human connection. You stand beside Apollodorus in the chamber that has become your sanctuary, watching the sun rise over Alexandria's harbor for what feels like both the first and thousandth time. The morning brings a perfect clarity to the Mediterranean world, as if the storm has washed the air clean and revealed the true beauty of this ancient crossroads. Ships begin to stir in the harbor, fishing boats preparing for their daily exodus, merchant vessels checking storm damage and preparing to resume interrupted voyages, and the ever-present grain ships that carry Egypt's wealth to feed the Roman world. This is the moment I have always treasured most, Apollodorus says softly, his hands moving with automatic precision to adjust the beacon for daylight operations. The transition from night watch to morning duties, when we shift from guiding ships through darkness to blessing their departure into light, it represents the lighthouse keeper's complete cycle: protection through danger, guidance toward safety, and benediction for new journeys. You understand that you have experienced something profound during your time in this ancient tower. The lighthouse has taught you lessons that transcend its immediate function, revealing truths about service, responsibility, and the connections that bind human communities together across vast distances of time and space. Every flame you've tended has been a prayer for travelers' safety. Every mirror adjustment an act of faith in humanity's ability to navigate the uncertain waters of existence. The harbor below spreads like a living manuscript written in the language of masts, sails, and moving water. Roman grain ships prepare to carry Egyptian wheat northward, their holds representing the agricultural surplus that maintains political stability across the empire. Phoenician traders load precious goods that will travel trade routes unchanged. Since before Homer sang of Odysseus, Greek vessels carry scholars and philosophers between the great centers of learning that preserve and expand human knowledge. The lighthouse connects us to every soul who has ever watched the horizon for a loved one's return. Apollodorus reflects, his weathered face peaceful in the morning light. Fishermen's wives scanning the sea for familiar sails. Merchants calculating the profits and losses carried in distant ships' holds. Mothers praying for sons who seek fortune in foreign lands. We are the constant point in their world of change and uncertainty. The beacon chamber fills with the golden light of Mediterranean dawn, transforming the utilitarian space into something approaching a temple. The bronze mirrors catch and reflect the sunlight, creating patterns of brilliance that dance across the stone walls like captured fire. The great flame continues to burn, though now it competes with natural illumination rather than standing alone against the darkness. You realize that your brief tenure as lighthouse keeper has connected you to one of humanity's most enduring traditions, the maintenance of lights that guide travelers safely home. The specific technology may change across the centuries, but the fundamental human need for navigation aids remains constant. The lighthouse represents civilization's promise to provide safety and guidance for those who venture into the unknown. A fishing fleet begins its departure, the small boats moving through the harbor entrance with the fluid grace of birds taking flight. Their captains wave respectfully toward the lighthouse, acknowledging the beacon that has guided their safe return through countless nights. The gesture embodies the unspoken contract between lighthouse keepers and the maritime community. We provide the light, you honor its purpose. Every keeper eventually returns to the world beyond this tower, Apollodorus says gently, his tone suggesting that he understands your time here draws to a close. But the lighthouse remains, tended by new hands, guided by the same principles, serving the same eternal purpose. We are temporary stewards of something permanent and sacred. The morning breeze carries familiar scent, salt air, burning olive oil, exotic spices, and the indefinable aroma of ancient stone, warmed by Mediterranean sun. These smells have become part of your identity, markers of an experience that has changed your understanding of service, community, and the quiet heroism required to maintain civilization's essential functions. As the sun climbs higher, you feel the lighthouse's influence beginning to release its hold on you, like a gentle tide receding from a peaceful shore. The beacon will continue its eternal vigil, guided by other hands, watched by other eyes, but serving the same timeless purpose that connects every era of human navigation. The great lighthouse of Alexandria stands as it has for centuries, its light reaching across 30 miles of Mediterranean waters to touch the horizon where sea meets sky in perfect unity. Ships will continue to seek its guidance, keepers will continue to tend its flame, and the ancient rhythm of maritime life will persist, as long as humans feel the call of distant shores. Your watch is ending, but the light burns on, eternal and faithful, guardian of all who travel the wind-dark sea. The lighthouse settles into its evening tranquility as your remarkable journey through ancient Alexandria draws to its gentle close. The great beacon continues its eternal rotation, casting its protective light across the Mediterranean waters where countless ships have found their way home throughout the centuries. The flame burns steadily in its bronze brazier, fed by the same precious olive oil that has sustained this marvel of the ancient world since its construction. You stand one final time in the circular chamber that has become your sanctuary, feeling the warm bronze under your hands, breathing the familiar scent of burning oil and salt air that carries stories from every corner of the known world. The lighthouse has taught you that some duties transcend time itself, the simple, profound act of maintaining light for those who travel in darkness, of providing a fixed point of reference in a world of constant change. The harbor below whispers, with the gentle sounds of night tanker chains adjusting to the tide, the distant murmur of voices from ships' crews, the soft splash of waves against ancient stone. Each sound speaks of human persistence, of the eternal conversation between civilization and the sea that has shaped Mediterranean culture for thousands of years. Apollodorus moves quietly through his evening routine, his weathered hands adjusting mirrors and checking fuel levels with the devotion of a temple priest tending sacred flames. His presence embodies the continuity of service that keeps the lighthouse burning generation after generation of keepers who have understood that their work serves something greater than themselves. The stars begin to emerge in the darkening sky, the same constellations that have guided navigators since humans first ventured beyond sight of land. The lighthouse beam sweeps across the celestial display, earthly fire greeting stellar light in an ancient dialogue between human ingenuity and cosmic order. You are part of this conversation now, connected to every keeper who has ever watched over travelers on the wind-dark sea. As the Mediterranean night deepens around you, the lighthouse becomes what it has always been, a beacon of hope piercing the darkness, a promise that safe harbor awaits those who trust in its light. The great flame burns steadily, its glow touching every soul within its reach, whispering the eternal message that someone watches, someone cares, someone tends the light that guides wanderers safely home. Your breathing slows to match the lighthouse's ancient rhythm, your heartbeat synchronizing with the gentle pulse of flame and mirror, bronze and stone. The beacon chamber embraces you with warmth and security, the sound of the sea below becoming a lullaby that carries you toward peaceful dreams. The last thing you see is the steady glow of the great flame, burning as it has for centuries. As it will for centuries to come, eternal guardian of the Mediterranean night. The lighthouse keeps its vigil as you drift toward sleep, its light reaching across the dark waters to touch the horizon where dreams and reality meet in perfect, timeless unity.